science. So then in college, I kind of narrowed down to biology and computer science. I had no computer science background when I started taking those courses. So it was a little bit of a learning curve for me, but I mean, now I'm doing comp bio 24/7. So it ended up pretty well.
Yeah. And hi again, I'm Jenea. I am also a PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania. We're both in the genomics and computational biology program. I started off in high school, not necessarily knowing exactly what I wanted to do, but like Kaylyn, I knew that I enjoyed science. I ended up taking an AP biology class, which was an interesting experience, but definitely helped me to kind of narrow down that I wanted to do biology when I went to college. But I also found that I enjoyed engineering. I kind of wanted to explore that too. So that's a little bit of what I did. I came into college, ending up not choosing a bioengineering major, but really wanting to combine my interests in technology and math and programming with biology. And so that's when I chose a minor in computer science with my biology major. And since then, I've been doing research in the field and am now a graduate student. Does anyone else have maybe a favorite subject right now, or something that they're thinking about is maybe their favorite within the STEM field?
My favorite subject is probably either math, or I sort of like a little bit of science, but it depends on what the topic is in science.
Yeah, thank you. Someone has their hand up.
I prefer biology because I like to learn about the world and like all of the things inside it, so then I can understand it when I'm older instead of being confused, because like there are so many creatures in the world and I just want to know about all of them, so then when I encounter one, I'm not just gonna be like bitten by it and think I'm okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Biology is definitely all encompassing and tells you a lot about the world. And even like I think it's Shay or Sanaya, they talked about how they liked math. And so hopefully this week you saw a little bit about how those two worlds are combined and how you can use those skills in unique ways to continue studying biology. Whether you're studying humans or you're studying animals, there's definitely lots of opportunity. Skylar says she's really interested in neuroscience and neurology and robotics, and loves anatomy and science as a whole. Jade says biology is great, but I never paid attention in bio class, which is totally fine. Jade, what other classes do you pay attention to that also interest you?
I guess I'll just speak. I mean, I love biology and I love math. I usually pay attention because my bio teacher was really boring.
Yeah.
I didn't pay attention in class.
Mm-hmm. So just to get an idea, what do you think some of your long-term goals might be for some of you that like biology, that like math? Kind of what do you see yourself doing in the future at this point?
I know biology and robotics don't mix, but I've always wanted to be a robotics engineer. So I might do that in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great idea. Also, V says they want to have a doctor in front of their name, which is fun. Jade again says Their dream is to always be, has always been to be an OBGYN or work in prenatal field. Sidel says more into math and tech, so I want to be a data scientist. So those are all great paths and also great foundations for kind of setting you up for what the comp bio field or bioinformatics in general could look like. So Kaylyn, maybe we want to start with like things to do in high school, classes to take, sort of things to focus on as a high school student. For those who are a little bit pre-high school, this still applies to you because you could, it's never too early to start thinking about kind of what those classes are that you want to take, how that will kind of continue to formulate as you develop as a student and as a scientist. So I would definitely say everyone keep an open mind during today's discussion. Think about what you want to do, what your goals are, and also what you like to do. So a lot of the times we, maybe our generation is changing this a little bit, but there's a difference sometimes between what you're absolutely passionate about and what you're good at. I think it's definitely okay for those to be a little bit different than each other. But I think for me, for example, I just love to create. I like art. I like designing. I like building things. I like working with my hands. And that is actually what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about creating. And so for me, science is one of the many avenues that I have to do that. I really see that comp bio and bioinformatics is a really creative integration of two different fields that allow us to kind of use our own creativity in a unique way to advance science, to answer biological questions. And so it's not always the case that I just love programming or I just love math. I don't think it's ever too early to think about what you want to do in the future in terms of what you're good at, what makes you happy, what fulfills you. And so for those of you that also like art or that also like creating, I definitely want to encourage you to think of science as an avenue to kind of explore that and get that out. For those that like talking to people and communicating, maybe you really like running teams or being a part of teams, think about your path in that sense. But there could also be people who just love math and biology, which is totally fine too. All right. So Kaylyn, take it away.
Yeah, so at least for my high school, our courses we really had like 2 or 3 options for like your courses every year. So for that, it kind of turned into, I have to take this class, but how interested am I in the topic? So as I like went through high school, I realized I took like physics and I realized I hated it. So then like I chose not to take an upper level physics, but I really liked math. I really liked the logic behind math and biology. So I decided to take a higher level of those courses. I was going to take them regardless. That wasn't really my choice, but it was how in depth I wanted to go into each one. But even just in general for high school, I kind of am the opposite of Jenea. I'm not a creative type. I was always really into like logic puzzles and like numbers. So like that part of science I like things that make sense as opposed to like theoretical or like you don't know where it's gonna go. That stuff stresses me out. So I kind of built my high school focused on courses that like there's this, there's that, and like that's the way it is. But then you also have opportunities outside of school to kind of look at your interests more specifically into what you want to do. So there's people, I had friends that like, they were like, oh, well, I kind of like medicine, let me go like take notes for a doctor. You know, like that's just like a high school shadowing experience. So it's not, you're not like learning a topic, you're not like learning certain things, but it's giving you experience, like just talking to people, seeing how like adult life works. So there's a lot of ways like outside of school to get experience in what it's like to be in the scientific field, as opposed to like knowing which aspect you want to go into specifically. So in high school, I didn't know, I had never heard of comp bio or bioinformatics. I didn't know that was a thing, that I was even an option. But me loving logic turned into, oh, well, I should do computer science. Like there's a lot of logic behind the codes that we write. I was like, oh, well, that's kind of goes with what I want to do, but I've never done it before. So for that, it was a new experience, but it also fed into what I knew I liked and what I knew I was good at, as opposed to trying to like, I don't know, be like Jenea and be really artsy and creative. Wasn't gonna happen. I had to know who I was and what I was good at.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that happen in high school, things that you may learn that are part of your regular curriculum that you can definitely continue to fine tune as you transition into college and beyond. One of them, obviously, you might get an intro to biology class, which is usually foundations of things like mitosis and meiosis. It's maybe genetics. It's learning the basics of life. Then there's math classes, which usually start anywhere from, what is it, like algebra and geometry, to pre-calculus and calculus. Those are areas that I would definitely recommend if you want to go into the field of comp bio or bioinformatics. Even if math is difficult for you or you don't enjoy it now, think of math as like a puzzle, as something that actually fits into a lot of different areas that we study. And so I would definitely recommend focusing on your math classes if you have a chance. There's, I think usually pre-calculus is like the bare minimum of when you get out of high school, but there's also calculus, advanced placement calculus, but we can talk about better ways to spend our time that are not AP classes. Yeah, so, and then there's, not everyone has the opportunity to study computer science or programming in high school, but there are plenty of ways that you can start learning how to program and code now. Does anyone want to share a little bit maybe of what they learned this week? Yeah.
Something that I didn't know was that I didn't know that cancer was a genetic disease. That's something new that I learned.
Mm-hmm.
I learned about multiple internships in America and also about how cancer is always building up inside of you because of cell mutation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else? Leandra learned about chemotherapy and how it can treat cancer, as well as the genetic disease, a type of arthritis. Yeah, so these are different like biology topics that definitely kind of build up on each other as you go through high school and college. But there's also ways that we can apply math to these things. For example, we can actually use math to model how tumors and cancer interact with one another or how they're growing at a specific rate. We can use math to model like the amount of times or the amount of different mutations in people's genomes across individual populations. Did you guys learn about Python this week at all? Coding?
Yeah, we learned a little bit about Python.
Mm-hmm. So was that your first time using it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what do you guys know about the Python language up until this point? Still a bit confused, no problem. So we just wanted to highlight the importance of coding in the field because Python is one of the many languages that we use to talk to computers and tell it, how we want to do specific computations. So as data scientists, we can use Python to visualize our data, to create plots, to tell stories about the things that are inside of our data. I think it was V that says you can use Jupyter to program in. Yep, Jupyter is one of the many environments that you can use Python in. But there's also other programming languages that we use as data scientists and computational biologists. Kaylyn, do you want to talk about R?
Yeah, so Python is kind of what where we start when we first start to code in terms of bioinformatics and comp bio. For my research specifically, I use a language called R, which I'm not sure how much you guys have seen Python, but Python kind of looks like English, whereas R, um, it's not more complicated, but it definitely looks different. But that R is more specific for data analysis itself. Whereas I learned Python in the context of regular computer science. I made a Pokemon game using Python. So not anything related to biology. Whereas R is mainly used to look at data sets to see if you have a large number of people that you want to study for some disease. R is really good at handling stuff like that. But you can really, once you're in the field and you know how to code, you can really use almost any language you want, whatever's easiest for you and whatever task you're trying to do. There is no one size fits all programming language in comp bio or even just in computer science itself. It's really dependent on what you're comfortable with and what you're using your code to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't used Python really since I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah.
It's 12 o'clock.
Yeah, so we are just highlighting two of the most popular programming languages that it's definitely never too early to learn about. I'm not sure where you guys learned about Python and R, but there's a free website for the most part called DataCamp that would allow you to get those introductory skills into Python and R. And it walks you through really simple examples. It's for super beginners. And I think in high school and 8th grade, I would be able to follow along. So for the most part, I think it's appropriate for where you are in your journeys right now. But we just want to highlight this because we know that computer science is not offered at every high school or even before that. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that you should be discouraged in learning how to do it. Even if you don't want to go into bioinformatics or computational biology, you can use programming and associated skills to go into any field. So if you decide you want to go into business, people usually use Python and R to model like how well a business is performing, or keep track of sales, or if you want to go into finance, you can study things like the stock market and things like that. If you want to even go into sociology, people use R to understand things that relate to public health or health disparities in disease, or things like that. So these are foundational skills that you can use anywhere, not just in biology and life sciences. So we definitely want to encourage you to sign up for data camp and start practicing on there if you can. If you don't have access to a computer science class at school right now, those are skills. I'm telling you, if I learned how to do this in high school, I would be in a much different place, probably working for like Google maybe. But that's a really great way to kind of prepare yourself for what the computational biology field is like. So we talked about biology, we talked about computer science a little bit, we talked about math a little bit. Maybe we highlight a little bit of what type of math and kind of like how that evolves from, or what type of subjects and how that evolves from high school to college. Okay, so I think one of the major things or ways that you can stay in the comp bio field, we highlighted a little bit of the classes that you can take or focus on now, but definitely something long-term you can pay attention to is kind of what major you want to do in college. There are some schools that have computational biology majors, but it's definitely it's not common. It's not as common. So usually, like me, people will come from biology or computer science and they will just study those fields separately. Kaylyn actually was in a program that was tailored toward computational biologists. So she studied computational biology in college, whereas me, I studied biology and computer science. But we're at the same institution. So you can sort of appreciate that there's many different pathways to studying this field. I don't know, Kaylyn, have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways, like Jenea said, to get into the field. I have a friend who her major was like applied math, so like really theoretical, like there's no more numbers in math when she was doing it. And now she's also in our program at Penn. So she like her major was math and she added like 1 or 2 bio classes just because. And that gave her enough of a foundation to feel comfortable going into the field. So she had no computer science at all. I mean, I guess math might include a little bit, but there's a lot of different avenues to get into the field. You don't have to know every part of it when you're going into it. So like my program was technically a bioinformatics program, but most of my studies were biology and computer science. I didn't really take a lot of math in college, whereas some people have a lot of computer science and math and they have no biology. But as long as you're interested in it, you can kind of find your own path through whatever field you go into.
Yeah, so that kind of highlights a little bit of how interdisciplinary or very diverse the field of comp bio is. Something else I was going to say is that you want to choose a college that would allow you to do research as an undergraduate. Does everyone know what I mean when I say that? I don't know if I'm asking you.
I don't really understand what an undergraduate and all of that is.
Okay. An undergraduate, it might be a little, I think there's a different term across the pond. Is it secondary? No.
Is it just called university?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you must be talking about university. Wait, is it before you graduate?
Yeah, but while you're in university, getting your bachelor's.
Usually it's university. In most other countries, they just say university, and then there are levels. So first you have your bachelor degree and master's degree. But in the US, it's very divided. Like, you know that college means first year to fourth year, I think, right?
Mhm.
And then graduate is from fourth year it's fifth year or fourth year? The graduate.
Fifth.
Yeah, then from fifth to whenever you want to stop, it's going to be graduate school.
Okay, yeah.
But in Europe, for example, it's university. Once you get out of high school, it's university.
Okay. Yeah. So while you're in university getting your bachelor's, there's things that you can do to get experience in the field. One of those is by doing research under an individual lab, or finding a way to get experience, hands-on in the science. So one way that you can do that as a computational biologist or a bioinformatician is you can join a lab that has a lot of data for you to analyze, or maybe there's opportunities for you to, even if that faculty isn't a computational biologist, with all those Python skills that you'll be learning and your R skills that you're learning, you can become a data scientist for anyone that has a research lab at university. Does that make sense? When I was an undergraduate, my first sort of comp bio experience was in data science for an ecology lab. And so the lab was studying tiny little bugs in streams and how they impact our environment, and how different invasive plants affect that ecosystem. And I was a data scientist for that because I had R skills and programming skills that allowed them to analyze their data better. So those are one of the many ways that you can see some of your programming, your math backgrounds, and your biology background come into play as you're deciding a little bit about what you want to do in college, even in high school. Kaylyn, anything to add onto that?
Yeah, I think so. Once you're in college, if you want to do research, don't be afraid to just reach out to like everyone. Even if you feel that you may not have as much experience as you would like, professors are always really, or mostly, eager to help their students move forward in whatever career that they want. So never be afraid to just say, hey, do you need someone to help you analyze data? Or do you need someone in your lab to do this or that? Because that's always a good experience for you, just like to develop as a scientist, to see how a lab works, and what it looks like to work with a group of people on the same, like the same biological question or something.
Mm-hmm. And so doing research at your university is one way to get that experience. I think you all mentioned that you talked about internships, which is another way. But the reason why we do all this research is because for the most part, we have some sort of end goal. We want to get experience for graduate school, whether that's a master's or a PhD, or you want to get experience to work as a research technician after your bachelor's. This is kind of all essential and sort of all comes together in college and towards the end. But for the most part, those are individual subjects and kind of things to focus on now in high school or even before that. Think about those subjects that you really like. If you enjoy creating, how can you be creative with math and computer science and biology? I think that's really what all this is about. So we have maybe more than 15 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions or want to share a little bit about what they want to do in the future with this knowledge? Yeah, Shay and Sanaya.
In the future, well, are you asking like what we want to do when we grow up, or what can we learn from this?
Maybe a little bit of both, but are you interested in bioinformatics and genomics and things?
Not as much, but it's interesting. It is kind of interesting, and I learned a lot from this camp this week. And I find some parts more interesting than others, but
Mm-hmm.
and I want to
Wow.
become a food scientist.
Wow, that sounds really cool. Yeah, you can definitely do that. I think we had one. Oh, Sadell says, did you guys take statistics? Yes, that is one of the foundational courses that we take or focus on. I took statistics in college, just an introduction to it, but now in my PhD, I had to take a lot more statistics. Kaylyn?
Yeah, I think I took like a very basic intro to statistics in high school. And then like it was the same class again when I was in college. But I didn't understand statistics until I got into my PhD program and like had to know it. So it's foundational, but you will keep taking it. Like they'll make sure that you understand what you need to know. So like I said, I did not like statistics in high school or college, but now like again, it's logical to me now. But that took some effort on my part to get there.
Sadell, are you taking statistics now? Yep. Even if you aren't now, I think it's definitely important to focus on. I think you in college or in university, in high school, you may just focus on probability. So if you have like a 6-sided die, what's the probability that you land on a 3? But definitely it develops into statistical inference, which is how we can use a bunch of those die rolls and make inferences and predictions about how the world is working around us. If that makes sense, how that kind of evolves. Any other questions? Or things that folks want to share?
So we've been discussing with the kids about how sometimes we need funding for our research, and pursue our studies in graduate school. And I wanted to ask for all of them if what opportunity you had to find funding, were you funded, or are you being funded right now? And I think they would also be interested to know about things like fellowship, scholarship, and other things.
Yeah, so I think both Kaylin and I are funded in different ways, like not just by our department or our school. So definitely as an undergraduate or in university, there are different colleges and scholarships that you can get. And one way to kind of do that, well, yeah, that's like a different conversation, how to find scholarships in college. That's one way. Usually when we talked about those internships and those research experiences, if it's not at your current university, or like if it's funded by the whatever your larger entity of science funding is, then usually that could be considered a fellowship for you as an undergraduate. Since you receive a stipend, they'll cover the living expenses for you traveling to do that research at the internship. That's one way. And then as PhD students, for the most part, and in STEM, most, probably 99% of PhD programs in STEM are funded, which means that you do not pay tuition, you don't pay to go to school, and you also receive money in the form of a stipend or a check basically every month for your living expenses. And that's one way to kind of decide what you might want to do next. Usually funded PhD programs, yeah, they kind of take off that burden from you of having to try to find it on your own. And I think they might be longer or more STEM focused. The only time I think some PhDs are not funded is if they're like in social sciences or like English or something like the humanities. But for the most part, STEM PhDs will be funded. Masters are usually not funded, even if it's in STEM. That means that you would have to pay to get your master's, but there are still usually fellowship opportunities for you to get just after you join the program. So what a fellowship actually is sort of like a scholarship, but usually you might hear of a scholarship from school, and it's usually a scholarship is sort of like you receive money, you receive assistance to do something, and that's sort of it. A fellowship, once you receive that money, there are also other requirements for you that you have to meet in order to keep that money. But for us, it's mostly just pertaining to our training. So I know Kaylin receives, well, it's not a fellowship, but it's a grant. It's sort of the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah. She receives funding from our university, and she has to like attend certain seminars, or I don't know, do you go to a conference or something like that?
Yeah, so we have to like present at a conference every year. We have to go to different classes and workshops.
Mhm.
So the way I think of it is a scholarship for like college is like a gift to you. A fellowship or a grant is like a job. So they're paying you to do things. You have to do things to earn that money. Whereas a scholarship is like, we're helping you, here's funding and here's help to get to your next stage. So we definitely have other requirements to like receive the funding from our fellowships or our grants. But it's all things that we would be doing anyway. It's all part of our training as a student, regardless of whether we got this funding from this place or not.
Yeah.
But there are specific requirements for each one.
Yeah, and there's other things that also come along with the fellowship usually, or like a grant. Usually it's funds to travel and go to a conference. So if you want to go out of the country and see a cool new place, but also talk about your science and network with other scientists, that's one of them. Usually there's funds for you to have technology. So you could buy a new computer if you needed to, or other research materials. Those are included. So a fellowship is sort of the main way that PhD students are funded, whether it comes with the PhD or is something that you apply for. That's one of the main things. Yeah, so thanks for that. Sadell asks, how did you choose your college? Kaylyn, you want to start?
So there were kind of two reasons I chose my college. One was that I knew I wanted to go into science, and they had a really good program for kind of helping minorities specifically get into the field. There were a lot of resources, kind of like this boot camp where like outside of our classes, we had other workshops and we got to talk to different researchers about things. So I really liked the program that it like was really supportive of us and our goals. The other reason I chose my college is because it was cheap for me to attend. It was close to home, and like we said, like PhDs are funded. Obviously, college and undergrad and university usually is not fully funded. So that played a factor in my decision, just because I was a high schooler with no money.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, there were a few different things that were factors. I was an athlete, so part of my decisions were being made based on where I could continue being an athlete. I ran track, so I had like offers from different schools. And I was sort of considering that as well. Then I kind of just came to a point that I didn't want to do sports. But anyway, I ended up running in college anyway at my college because it wasn't too far away from home. I was able to drive there in about 3 hours and still, just be a 3 hour drive away from my family, my parents. It was a close knit community. I felt really welcomed there by the Black community specifically. I felt that I would be really supported and uplifted there. Um, what were some other reasons? I think those are the main ones. I just felt really at home. And then I also was able to run track and kind of do everything that I wanted to do without feeling overwhelmed. I did not honestly put that much thought into the college process, but I ended up doing okay. So I I feel like Kaylyn's maybe a better example of that. But yeah. I think those are some of the factors that you'll consider, but also money. So we talked about funding in graduate school, but also scholarships for college was important. And so it's kind of like you also have to think about how many loans you want to take out for doing that. I only took out loans for my first 2 years because I ended up getting another scholarship while I was there, and then also becoming a resident assistant. So I got free room and board and then a little stipend on the side. So for those of you considering how you might be able to afford college, definitely think about being a resident assistant because it was a good job to have just as a growing leader in general, someone who was just interested in interacting with my community and leading people. And so that's something that was a really impactful experience for me, but also saved me a lot of money in the long run. So. All right. Any other questions that we can answer about whatever we did, or sticking with the field of bioinformatics or comp bio? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie and everyone on organizing this. It was so great to interact with you all. I am also in the Slack. If you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer, and maybe Kaylyn can be added. But definitely the main takeaways are, if you haven't already, sign up for Data Camp or other coding websites that are free, and definitely learn how to program in R and Python, and just pay attention in your math and bio classes, since those are really the key areas that are the foundations of our field and will really benefit you in whatever you decide to do. So thank you so much. Any last words, Kaylyn?
Nope, I think we covered it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your days.
So everyone, thank you. Thank you, Jenea. Thank you, Kaylyn. Thank you very much for all the information. Everyone, we say thank you to Kaylyn and Jenea for sharing their experiences. Oh, you have a lot of thank yous.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
That was
Yeah,
very
no problem.
informative. And I hope that those information will be very helpful to you.